Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be watching from, and welcome to AMN Healthcare International's live show, Onwards and Upwards, where we discuss everything a global healthcare worker needs to know about living and working in the United States. My name is Danielle Friedman. I am your host this morning, and I am very happy to be here with you all. We have our live once-a-month immigration update with immigration experts. We are going to be sharing updates, answering your questions, and just having a lot of fun like we do every month. And we actually have positive news this month, so that is great to share. Before we get started, I wanted to say Happy International Nurses Month to all of our nurses around the world. In the United States, we take a month, the month of May, to thank our nurses for their critical role that they play in our patient care, in advocacy and excellence. So thank you to all of you. We here from AMN Healthcare, thank you for your roles that you play. Thank you for your love, for your passion, your dedication to excellence, and we hope that you feel celebrated all month long. So happy International Nurses Month. Please let me know where you are watching from in the comments. I love to see where our viewers are, and please feel free to put your questions. This is a conversation. This is your time to ask our experts things that you want to know about the immigration process. Hello to Doris from Ghana, Sherry from Trinidad and Tobago, Judith from the United Kingdom, Beatrice from Kenya, Deirdre from South Africa, my home country, Patience. We have got people coming from all over the globe. Milanis from the Philippines, Caroline from Kenya, Maki from Lesotho. Wow, guys. Well, it is so great to have you all here with us this morning. Thank you for joining us. Once again, please feel free to put your questions in the chat. And if you have been following along, you know that we are AMN Healthcare. We are the largest public company to offer both direct hire and staffing options for international nurses all over the United States. So our openings are constantly changing. So please feel free to submit an application on our website. We're going to drop the link in the chat. That link is amnhealthcare.com/international. And our recruiters are on hand, ready and waiting to help you with your applications to reach your American dream. So who knows, maybe you could be celebrating Happy International Nurses Month in the United States with us. So let's get started this morning. Let's bring out our experts and let's get to the questions. Okay, good morning to Anita and to Chris. How are you both?
Doing good, thank you.
Good.
Hey, good morning.
Well, we have a familiar face if you've been joining us for our monthly Q&As, and we have a new face joining us, which we're very excited about.
I'm excited to be here.
Good. We're excited to hear your expertise. So why don't we take a minute and just do some introductions. So we'll start with our newcomer, Anita. Can you please share with our audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Anita. I work from an office in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I've been working in healthcare for the past 5 years. So I'm really looking forward to getting to work with you today and assist you with your questions.
Wonderful. And Anita, you work with Mike Hammond, right?
I do. Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. He's a regular on our show, so we're excited to have you join.
Thank you so much.
All right, Chris, you're up.
Yeah, good morning, everybody, and nice to see everybody. And yeah, I'm Chris Masilla. I'm an attorney with Masilla Unkenholt, and looking forward to this session with Danielle as usual, and happy to welcome Anita to the group.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Anita. I can see we got lots of questions already going off in the chat. Anita, you will learn. We try to take as many questions as we can and power through. And we always start the same way. What is the update? And what do we think is going to happen? So, Chris, we'll let you get started. What happened for our June Visa Bulletin? We were happy. There was movement.
Yeah, so I mean, this was nice, and I think this was probably towards the positive end of the range of outcomes we were hoping for. So, for those of you who don't know, the Visa Bulletin usually comes out in the middle of the month, and so the June Visa Bulletin was just released a couple of days ago. And the June Visa Bulletin said that for EB3 for the Philippines, Mexico, and frankly, all countries other than China and India, it promoted the priority date from January 1st to February 8th of 2023. So that's about a 5-week jump. So that is the most positive jump we've seen in 2025 and really for the second half of 2024. So that's the biggest jump we've seen in quite some time. I think that's important. The other piece I think that's important is the chart B, which we don't often talk too much about, but the chart B, which is the dates of filing chart, that lists March 1, 2023. That means if you're domestic in the United States, in some instances, you're actually able to file your adjustment of status, even if you're between that February 8th and March 1st date. Here's what's important, I think, for most listeners about that March 1st, 2023 date. Because this jump happened for 5 weeks, it probably means that the U.S. CIS and Department of State have another jump in there to get us even closer to that March 1st date. Hopefully, maybe I'm being optimistic, but that could happen. Or at the very least, it probably means we are not going to see a retrogression this summer. Having said all of that, come August or September, which is the end of the U.S. fiscal year, the U.S. fiscal year runs until September 30th, we would not be surprised to see maybe at the very end there, the last 4 to 6 weeks, that we do retrogress, or the Visa Bulletin even lists a U, which means unavailable. And all that means is that all the 140,000 visas, at least for the particular allotment, which is a sub number of 140,000. Anyway, that particular allotment would be used. So the net, I think, of the whole thing, summarizing what I've said, is that we saw positive movement. I think that's good. I think it's safe to say that we will not see any significant retrogressions for the rest of this U.S. fiscal year. Having said that, towards the end, maybe the last 4 to 6 weeks, it wouldn't surprise me if at that point we see a retrogression or unavailable, but I don't really consider that anything significant to be concerned about. That's just signaling that the U.S. government has used all of the visas that are allocated through September 30th, which is the end of the U.S. fiscal year.
Okay, so some good predictions, a lot to unpack there, some good news, some good thoughts. So a quick follow-up question, Anita. I'm hoping you can help us understand. Chris said data filing, final action. If you are someone who is just joining us for the first time, why are there these 2 different dates, and how do we make sense of them?
Sure. Yeah, the 2 different dates, it just depends on the number of visas that's available and the number of applicants that's applying for their immigrant visa. Most of the time, there's more individuals applying than there's visas available. So that's when we use the final action chart, and you cannot file an adjustment of status application until you're current in that chart. But sometimes when there's more visas available towards the end, like we are right now, then they'll switch to the dates of filing chart to allow applicants to file their adjustment of status application sooner to get moving forward with the process. But their green card or their immigrant visa won't actually be issued until their priority date's current in the final action chart.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you for the explanation. And then Chris, a follow-up question. So you've given us your predictions through the end of this fiscal year. What do you think will happen come October Visa Bulletin?
Yeah, I have that one's impossible, I think, to say at this time. The October Visa Bulletin will come out in September of this year. So that's about 4 months from the time we're recording this. I think it's absolutely impossible to say what that will be. So I'm not even going to try and speculate, Danielle.
Well, let's just say we hope for very positive movement.
Yes, definitely.
I think we can all agree on that one. Okay, so let's go to the comments. I see we have lots and lots of questions. A lot of questions about predictions about the future. So you heard from Chris and Anita what they both think for the future. So let's see. We have a question from Jerome. Jerome says, do nurses need to pass the NCLEX before their I-140 can be filed? So Anita, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so nurses should pass the NCLEX. There's a few steps that you'll need to complete before the I-140 is even filed. So you'll want to make sure that you have the proper education that your employer is requiring, which is normally an associate's degree in nursing. And you'll also need to pass your NCLEX and have your passage report ready before the I-140 can be filed.
Okay, great. Thanks, Anita. So that actually leads me perfectly into another question that we get a lot. How do I make myself the most marketable, the best candidate for the jobs in the United States? As I'm sure a lot of you who are watching at home now are feeling, there is a lot of competition. We have more NCLEX passers now than ever. And we've put together a little chart for you on how to understand and how to think about how to make yourself the best applicant when you are applying, whether that's to us or somebody else, although we hope it's to us. So let's bring up that graphic. We're going to go through it real quick. So pass the NCLEX. So to answer your question, Jerome, yes, you need to pass the NCLEX. That's your golden ticket to getting started. So think about your specialty. Think about what specialties are needed, how to make yourself and your application stand out. Current work experience in an acute care setting. So this is critical. This is something that U.S. employers are looking for right now, something that you can also work on getting more of while you are waiting for your immigrant visa to process. Type of qualification. So if you have any of these and you have time to be able to get a higher qualification while you are in that retrogression timeline, you could be thinking about that as well. Years of experience, type of hospital experience. So if you are a new grad and you are thinking of applying, now is a good time to get more experience. Hospitals are looking for nurses with at least 2 years of acute care experience. And English language passage. So if you have time right now while you're going through your retrogression processing, and you are waiting for your visa to become eligible, you can think about taking that English language test. That's another way to make your application stand out if you have already passed. So these are things to keep in mind as you are applying for jobs in the US and you want to make yourself more marketable to US employers. Okay, so thank you, Anita, for taking that one. Chris, we're going to turn to you next. We have a question from Doris in the chat. Doris says, how long does it take to be scheduled for an interview after becoming current?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think there's a few pieces to this. So number one, when you're current, it's going to largely be driven by the embassy that you are supposed to appear for your interview. Different embassies have different processing times, and some processing times that are faster at certain times of the year and slower at other times of the year. So for instance, it's not uncommon in the summer and especially late summer for the embassies to allocate some of their staff to student visas and H-1B visas. So that can sometimes lead to a bit of a backlog there. Around the end of the year, which are the Christmas holidays and the New Year holidays, it's very common for the embassies and consulates to back up there. I think broadly speaking, we see, 2 months at the fastest and maybe, 5 months at the longest. But what I'd encourage you to do is if you are current, contact your case manager, contact your attorney, contact your paralegal, and see if they can help you get a good estimate as to how long that would take, recognizing that we are all at the hands of the U.S. government with this, and things can change pretty quickly. But the other thing that I often say about this is everyone is very interested in having that process go as quickly as possible. So don't think that they're not. The companies like AMN are very interested in getting you to the United States. The hospitals are obviously very interested in getting you bedside. The attorneys, paralegal staffs, and case managers are very interested in getting those things done as quickly as possible. So don't think that if you're not getting an answer that you're comfortable with, obviously you want to ask second and third questions, but I probably wouldn't assume that someone is trying to slow down your case. It's often we are sort of stuck by the embassies and consulates, that some are better at communication than others. And so sometimes it just becomes difficult to get communication and information from the embassies and consulates, and it's not from a lack of trying.
Okay, thank you, Chris, for all that information and that clarification. I'm sure that's helpful for Doris. Anita, a follow-up question to Doris's question. So if we're assuming that once you're current, it can take about 2 to 5 months to get an interview, depending on the consulate.
Mm-hmm.
How long might it take somebody to actually come into the United States and be able to start? What would that kind of full timeline look like?
Yeah, sure. So once the interview is scheduled, they typically schedule it a month in advance. So you'll get your notice a month before your interview. And then you have 6 months from the date that your visa is issued to be able to enter the States. So once you get that interview notice, you'll want to go ahead and complete your medical exam. And your interview notice will have instructions for your medical exam, how to schedule it, where to go. And at that time, you'll also prepare all of the documents that you'll bring with you to your interview. So once you attend your interview, you'll already have all the requirements completed. And they typically approve your visa on the spot and issue your passport back to you within about a week. Sometimes, if they need additional information, then they'll issue what's called a 221G for you to submit additional information, and then it can take a couple of months for them to process that information. But as long as you have all of the requirements you need for the interview, typically you're approved on the spot. And then once you receive your immigrant visa, then you have 6 months to come and enter the States.
Okay, great. Thank you, Anita. Doris, hopefully that's some good, helpful information for you, and congratulations on becoming current. That's very exciting. Chris, I have another question for you from Tina. Tina is asking, if I'm a new applicant and my employer does have prevailing wage and they submit an application for me, how long till I could get to the United States? So how long are you generally seeing? I mean, obviously we don't know how things might change, but as of right now, what's your kind of general?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of steps to this. So, and from the information that the individual has told us, we've got some information, but we don't have all the information. So the one piece of information that we get off this question is that it says that the employer has the prevailing wage. I'm going to assume that means that they have filed a prevailing wage determination with the U.S. Department of Labor. And the U.S. Department of Labor, which takes, we're seeing them maybe at 4.5 months right now. But at other times of the year, we've seen them take as long as 8 months. So what happens is that the employer files a prevailing wage determination with the Department of Labor. And sometime between 4.5 and 8 months later, the U.S. Department of Labor issues something called a prevailing wage determination. And that is the prevailing wage. So you will sometimes hear in the discourse and on social media and blogs and things like this, people talking about the prevailing wage, but what they really mean is a salary survey. A prevailing wage is a very specific thing, and it's a document issued by the U.S. Department of Labor called a prevailing wage determination. And once that's issued, it's locked in. It doesn't change. So even if your case takes 20 years, you're still bound, and your employer is still bound by the prevailing wage that was issued with your case. Now, a prevailing wage determination, once it's issued, is not valid forever. It's actually only valid between 90 days and 1 year. Generally, these things all expire on June 30th, or shortly after June 30th. So some of the next question is, when was your prevailing wage approved until? When does it expire, the prevailing wage determination? Let's work under the presumption that the prevailing wage determination is valid for 90 days from today. So that would be until August 16th, which would be almost the longest we would ever see it valid until after July 1st, in which case it gets gets approved until June 30th. In any event, if your prevailing wage determination is valid, the employer has to take another step, which is the employer has to post notice, which is physically post notice at the work site that you are going to work at, or in some instances at the work site, all of the work sites where it has foreign nurses working. And that notice posting has to go up for 10 business days. And then once the 10th business day is completed, that notice posting has to be down for 30 days until it is considered ripe, which means it's eligible to be used. And so if an employer has foreign nurses at 10 work sites, the employer has to post that notice posting at all 10 work sites. And so we are going to be held by whichever of those work sites takes the longest to actually physically post that notice for 10 business days. And I can tell you, for someone who's worked in this area for a while, that sometimes is a lot of work, because we're passing out that notice posting to 10 work sites, and then we're constantly following up. And sometimes maybe at one work site, the human resources director who would normally do this, maybe she's out on vacation for a week or two. That slows down the posting. Then she gets back from vacation. She's not going to, at 9 o'clock in the morning, hang it right up. She needs to maybe take another couple of days to catch up on her work. And so that period of notice posting, we often can take 90 to 120 days after the prevailing wage determination is issued. So now, if we're continuing now, the question said the employer already has prevailing wage. If by that the questioner means the employer already has filed the prevailing wage determination, had it certified, and has completed this notice posting step, then and only then can the employer file your green card, your Form I-140. But you can see, depending on where the employer is in the process, it might mean that they're going to take 6 months plus another 3 months to do the notice posting. So maybe 9 months. In other instances, it might mean they could more or less immediately file your case if they've completed all of those pre-steps, because those pre-steps are not conditional to you. They can be used by all nurses who are recruited during that same period. So now let's work under the presumption that by the questioner's comment, they said the prevailing wage determination was filed, it was certified, the notice posting was hung up for 10 business days, it came down, 30 days have also expired, and so now the notice posting is right. We're now ordinarily, not always, but ordinarily allowed to file your green card. If we file your green card, that will set your priority date. So if we were to file your green card today, May 16th, which means that over the last 6 to 9 months, we've been going through all this prevailing wage process. If we file it today, regardless of if we file it premium or regular processing, your priority date is going to be May 16th, 2025. And as we mentioned a little earlier, the U.S. Visa Bulletin says February 8th, 2023. And so the delta between those two dates, the difference between those two dates is about 2 years and 3 months, roughly. And so if the Visa Bulletin moves in lockstep month by month, then your green card would not be eligible for an interview for 2 years and 3 months. More realistically, we've seen the Visa Bulletin move a lot slower than we'd hoped recently. And so it might not be 2 years and 3 months. It might be, and I'm speculating here, 2 years and 6 months, let's say. So you'd look at 2 years and 6 months from today, May 16th, 2025. You go forward 2 years and 6 months, and that would take you to November 16th, 2027. And then your case is eligible to have an interview. And as Anita and I talked about a little bit earlier, that's another, say, 2 to 5 months. So you're probably not going to have your interview, which would make you eligible to enter the United States, until sometime like the first part of 2028.
Very interesting and very helpful. You know, I've been hosting these shows now for about 2.5 years. If you've been watching along, my mom, Tanya Friedman, used to be the host. And I have been doing law-related stuff for about 4 years, and I learn so much every time we do these shows. So thank you both for the explanations. To sum up what Chris said so eloquently, I think, and stop me if I'm wrong, Chris, once the employer has the prevailing wage, which with AMN Healthcare, all of our employers on the direct hire side will have prevailing wage by the time that you are doing the interview, so we can file right away. You are looking at about 2.5 to 3 years to arrive in the United States right now, give or take.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
Give or take. On our staffing side, O'Grady Payton already has a prevailing wage, and it's constantly rolling. So you also don't have to worry there if you're getting filed for staffing. Is the timeline the same, Chris? I assume so.
Yeah, so I think you've raised a really good point, I think, Danielle, which is there is an advantage to sign your contract with companies like AMN and other companies who regularly engage in this process. Because as Danielle alluded to, AMN has what they call a rolling process, which means for AMN staffing, they are constantly posting notice, filing new prevailing wage determinations, posting notice. They're really looking 6 months and 9 months into the future, so that they do not have to, when you sign a contract with AMN, they do not have to delay the filing of your I-140. And so effectively, by signing with a company that regularly engages in this process, you're really saving 6 to 9 months on the process.
100%. Okay, thank you, Chris. That actually leads me to another question, a good question that I saw from Joaquin. Joaquin says, what happens if the sponsoring employer goes out of business mid-process? Anita, what advice do you have for Joaquin here?
So it depends on if the I-140 was already filed. If the I-140 was already filed and it was already approved, and then the company goes out of business, then you can switch employers and file a new I-140 with the new employer and request to retain the priority date of your previous I-140 with your old employer. And so that will allow you to pick up from your old priority date, so you do not lose time with that, and you can move forward with the remainder of the process. But if the I-140 was not filed, then you would need to find a new employer, and whether or not you can immediately file depends on if they have their priority date, if they followed the posting notice steps that Chris discussed. So you may have to restart the process and get a new priority date if you have to file a new I-140 with a new employer.
Thank you, Anita, and thank you, Joaquin, for your important question. I think it raises a consideration that sometimes we don't often talk about, but I think something that you should be really thinking about if you're watching along with us. You want to make sure that you are choosing to come to the United States with a company that you really can trust, that you know is transparent, that you know really, has got your best interests as you are going through this process, because it can be a confusing and scary and difficult process. I came to the United States about 25 years ago. It's a big deal to come to the United States. It's very exciting, but it can be very scary. And this is something that I think comes up more often than not for a lot of nurses, especially during this retrogression period. And so that's why it's very important to come with a company that you know is ethical, transparent, and fair. And with AMN Healthcare, we've been doing this for a long time. We have seen retrogression. We know how to handle this. We are a publicly traded company. So for us, transparency and ethical behavior is extremely important. So I just wanted to say to Joaquin, good question. Thank you for thinking farther into the future and making sure, to ask those tough questions that I think others might not be considering. But those are important things to keep in mind. And if you would like to come to the United States with us, we would be happy to help you reach your American dream. I'm going to drop our link in the chat. That's amnhealthcare.com/international. Our recruiters are on hand, ready and waiting to help you with your applications. Now is the time to get that priority date. As Chris said, that priority date comes with the date that you file. So take advantage of that. Get your place in line. You don't want the line to continue growing and you've missed out on getting your place. So get your place today. Okay, so we have got lots of questions in the chat. We're going to take as many as we can this morning. So Chris, I think you're up next. We have a question from Maki. Maki says, is it allowed for my child on a green card to attend school and stay in another country, for example, Canada?
So the number one answer, and I want to start with this, and I will actually end this question with this as well, which is, this is what I would call high stakes immigration question. This is not the place you should be asking this question. You should talk to an immigration attorney who can look at your specific case and your child's case, because the consequences of you getting this wrong could mean that your child loses his or her U.S. green card. So let me start with that. Having said that, in many instances, it's able for the child to be overseas for a period of time, as long as they're maintaining a permanent residence in the United States. And that's the part that I would really want you to drill down with an immigration attorney, which is what steps can be taken to make sure that the child is maintaining U.S. permanent residency beyond just the facial card itself. And now I'll continue again where I started, which is you should really talk to a U.S. immigration attorney who can help you work through some of those issues.
Okay, there you go, Maki. As always, leave the immigration questions to our experts. We can give advice, but this is not a legally binding forum. So make sure to speak to your attorney, especially when you have sensitive questions like that. You want to make sure that you're getting the best advice possible for your specific situation. Okay, Anita, we have a question from Jadamas. Jadamas says, I have a newborn. Congratulations. I have asked NVC how to add her to our process, and I was told I just need to submit the birth certificate, but the attorney said we also need to include a passport. Is that true? Is this another question that should be discussed with their attorney, or can you give any advice for Jadamas?
Yeah, I can give general advice for this. Typically, you do submit the birth certificate as well as the biographic passport page when you're adding your newborn. If it's still at the NVC stage, then you can submit those documents with the NVC, just requesting that they add them as your dependent. If you already have your DQ notice, you're documentarily qualified. And if you have your interview date, then you can also request to add your baby at your interview as well. And it would be the same documents, their birth certificate and their passport.
Okay, thank you, Anita. Well, there is your answer. Okay, so we have got a question, Chris, from JSam that just says H-1B, please, ? So I think Jay is looking for some information on the H-1B and would like to know, is this a route for international nurses?
Yeah, and the answer is it might be. So when we think about immigration in the United States, we have to think about it from two dimensions, not one dimension. The one dimension that everybody who's listening probably thinks about it is, do I qualify? Can I get an H-1B, or for that matter, can I get an EB-3 green card? Do I qualify? And that's only half of the question. Employers have to qualify as well. So let's talk about what the nurse needs to do to get an H-1B. Primarily, the nurse needs to have a U.S. equivalent bachelor's degree in nursing in order to qualify for a nursing H-1B visa. And by the way, and what we find, I'd imagine this is true with Anita, 90% of our nurses, something like that, that's not a scientific number, but an estimate, do meet that standard. So the vast majority of overseas nurses meet the standard for an H-1B. It's the second half that is much more difficult, which is that the U.S. employer has to be offering a nursing position that requires a bachelor's degree for entry into that specific job. And that's very hard. Why? In the United States, the standard for most nursing positions is not a bachelor's degree, but is actually a little less than a bachelor's degree, what we sometimes call an associate's degree or a diploma nurse, which is usually a 2 or 3 year degree, not a 4-year bachelor's degree. If your hospital, broadly speaking, allows 2 and 3 year degrees from Americans to take those positions, then the fact that you qualify for an H-1B is not enough, because the employer's position does not qualify for an H-1B. Having said that, we have seen increasingly a lot of employers they don't just have one job called nurse, they have many different jobs within their organization that all do nursing functions on some level and at different levels and at different responsibilities, but they all generally do nursing, but specifically they have different responsibilities. And so we are seeing increasingly hospitals and health systems who have certain divisions, floors, units within their hospital network that we can make H-1B successful petitions for. And so can you get an H-1B? Perhaps. You need to make sure you reach the bachelor's degree criteria, and then you need to find an employer or a health system that can have a successful, that can successfully tell the U.S. government that it only requires bachelor's degrees for some sub-occupation within its organization.
Okay, so thank you, Chris. So, JSAM, it sounds like the H-1B might be an option for a small subset of nurses. Let's take a positive scenario. Let's say we have a nurse, let's say JSAM qualifies. He has all of the requirements. And let's say that the hospital also qualifies, has all of the requirements to be able to file an H-1B petition on their behalf. Anita, what might a nurse want to consider when they're weighing the option of an H-1B or coming on a different visa type?
Sure. So an H-1B would be a good option for you to be able to enter the States and immediately begin working. So you can enter the United States much quicker than you would enter with the immigrant process. However, one consideration is the effect that it will have on your family. So if you enter on an H-1B, then your spouse will enter on an H-4 visa, and they will not be able to work on their H-4 until you have started the immigrant process and you have an I-140 approval. So it could be a couple of years until your spouse could begin working. So some nurses, they prefer to come to the States on the H-1B simply so that their family can enter the U.S. earlier and they can begin working for their employer earlier. But some choose to stay in their country of nationality so that all family members can continue working while they're moving forward with the immigrant process. So you can continue moving forward with your work as well as complete every single step to your immigrant process. And then once your immigrant visas are issued, then everyone can enter the States and everyone has work authorization. So those are the considerations to think about with your family when determining whether to come on an H-1B.
Okay, thank you, Anita. Chris, do you have anything to add there on what a nurse might consider with coming on an H-1B in terms of pros or cons?
No, I think that really does a nice job summing it up.
Okay, great. So I think if you are a nurse who is watching along and thinking, is this an option for me? If you are able to find an employer that has the ability to sponsor an H-1B, it might be a faster option to get you to the United States initially, but there are some pros and cons that you definitely need to weigh up and decide if that is a good move for you and your family. So thanks for summing that up, Anita. Okay, so you mentioned the I-140 approval, and I see we have got multiple questions asking about that. So Chris, I'm going to turn to you. How long does it generally take for an I-140 to get approved? And does it really matter during this period right now that we're experiencing retrogression, or when might it matter?
Yeah, no, those are good questions. So the first thing to know is that an I-140 filing can go what we call premium processing or regular processing. Premium processing means that there has to be an additional $2,805 paid. So it's extraordinarily expensive per petition, by the way. But if that is paid with at the time you file your I-140, or frankly, anytime the I-140 is pending, the U.S. government will review your case within 3 weeks, 15 business days. That doesn't mean they'll approve it, but it means they will review it. They will either approve it or issue what's called a request for evidence. So that's one path. Regular processing, we see a lot of variance throughout the year. You know, I've seen them go as fast as like 2 months. I've seen them take as long as 10 or 11 months. So if you want a specific timeline for your specific case, the best time to ask that question is when your case is getting ready to be filed, and your law firm should be able to do two things. One, there's publicly available forums out there, including USCIS.gov, that do publish processing times. We find those are of questionable accuracy. And so what we find a better way to do it is we'll look, at a firm like ours, Anita's firm as well, I suspect. We file a lot of nursing cases. We file, literally a couple dozen almost every day. As a result, we can sort of tell you internally how long we were seeing. We can say, we're seeing, and I'm making this up, so don't quote this. We're seeing that the service center is currently processing cases from January 1st, 2025. We just received 2 January 1st, 2025 approval notices yesterday. And so if that were the case, we could estimate that your case would probably take about 4.5 months under the regular processing of I-140. You should know, though, that I-140 processing time varies quite a bit. And so even though today we're saying it's 4.5 months, that does not mean that your case will be approved in 4.5 months. It might be approved in 3 months. It might be approved in 8 months. Unfortunately, we're beholden to the U.S. government. Now, yes, another good question, I think, Danielle, which is, when might it be appropriate to file premium processing? In my mind, there's 2 reasons to file premium processing. Well, let me back up. Whenever the green card is approved, whether it gets filed premium processing here on May 16th and it's approved in a couple of weeks, let's say it's approved by June 1st, or whether you file regular processing and it's not approved until, October, either way, your priority date is going to be May 16th, 2025. And as we mentioned a little earlier in the call, we have about a 2.25 year visa retrogression. And so it doesn't matter when your I-140 is approved. It only matters when your case is filed. And so for many cases right now, given the retrogression, whether you file premium or regular processing is actually of no consequence, because the date that matters is your filing date. But there are 2 instances, I think, given the retrogression, where premium processing can be helpful. One, certain people are very nervous about this process, and so they want peace of mind. And if you're a nurse and you think that $2,800 US dollars, $2,800 is worth it, maybe you want to ask your employer if you can pay for it to file that case premium processing, and you will get a result in a couple of weeks, and that might be of benefit to you to get that peace of mind. So that's one instance. The second instance is, we do see, and Anita touched on this a little while ago, potential employees, potential nurses who maybe had a case filed, let's say in 2021, but for whatever reason are no longer pursuing that case. And that can be a reason you chose. Maybe you wanted to go in 2021, but between the time your case was filed and the time your case was eligible for an embassy interview, you decided you didn't want to pursue it. Perhaps you had a child, perhaps you had a family emergency, perhaps you have a spouse who got a good job opportunity somewhere else. Whatever it might be, those would be reasons you would have. There might be reasons the employer had, and it might even be that the employer, for instance, went out of business and somehow stopped processing your case. So for any of those reasons, you may still have a priority date, under my example, in 2021. If you have an old priority date that you are recapturing, and that's the term we use, you're going to recapture that 2021 priority date. Even though we would file your case today, we might want to file that premium processing. Why? Because if that gets approved in 2 or 3 weeks, the approval notice is not going to say priority date May 16th, 2025. It's going to say priority date 2021, which means you're going to be immediately current, which means you might be able to get your visa as soon as this summer, meaning you might get your visa appointment, your interview this summer. So I think those are 2 reasons to file premium processing given the current environment. 1, peace of mind, but that's an awfully expensive aspirin to take. And 2, some sort of recapture scenario.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So I think that's a great explanation. To sum it up, sounds like your I-140 approval date is less important than your I-140 filing date, because that filing date is really your place in line. We keep using the word priority date. That's your ticket. The date that you're filed is your priority date. If you filed today, May 16th, 2025, that's your ticket in line. That's the date that we look at when we're looking at those charts. So thank you for that information, Chris. Anita, I see a question from Rhoda. Rhoda says, my priority date is August 2023. My daughter will be 21 in September. What is the result of this for immigration? So I think Rhoda is worrying about something that we call aging out. Mm-hmm. What can you explain to our viewers what that means and how that might be handled?
Sure. So when families file an I-140 petition and they include their children, the children have until they are 21 years old to be eligible for the immigrant visa based on their parents' petition. So if they turn 21 and they age out of the process, then they would have to file their own petition or find another means. But there is a way to protect the child from aging out of the process, depending on how long the I-140 petition was pending. So if they have their approved I-140 and they're going to turn 21, they can the amount of time that their I-140 was processing and deduct that from their current age. And then once their case is approved and their priority date is current, as long as they move forward with the process within 1 year, and that can include steps such as paying the fee bill, as long as they take a certain step to move forward with their process to seek that immigrant visa, then they can still move forward with the process as long as their age is under 21 when they deduct the amount of time that the I-140 was processing.
Okay, so sounds like for Rhoda, there may be a way to kind of lock in her daughter's age. Is that what I'm hearing, Anita?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there might be some kind of protection that would allow her to make sure that her daughter doesn't necessarily age out.
Correct, depending on how long that her I-140 petition was processing.
Okay, well, there you go, Rhoda. So there's something for you to talk to your immigration attorney about. So that's good news there. Okay, so we got lots of questions, and I see we are close to coming up on time. So we are going to try to take as many questions as we can, everybody. Our experts are so knowledgeable, and this has been such a helpful session. So I hope you are all finding this helpful as well. I know I'm learning a lot today. So let's see, Chris, we have a question from... Let's see, we got lots of questions from Tina. Tina says, is my agency legally allowed to charge me recruitment fees?
Perhaps. That's a little bit beyond at least my area of expertise. My expertise is the immigration process, really talking about a contractual issue. So my answer, unfortunately, is I don't honestly know, and it probably comes down to what they're charging you and for what reasons. So just broadly speaking, they can certainly charge you for, let's pretend they paid for your NCLEX review course. They can charge you back for a reimbursement on that NCLEX review course. They can charge you back for perhaps a flight. If you took a flight or your family took a flight, they can charge you back for that. If they're just charging you a fee, I might suggest that you look at other recruiting organizations, because that would be unusual to me. But again, it wouldn't be unusual if they're asking for reimbursement. It would be unusual, I think, if they're asking for just money to prepare your case.
So I think I can actually take this one, Chris. So Tina is asking, so I think that's good information just on any other fees. Tina is specifically asking about recruitment fees. If the organization that you are coming with that is sponsoring your application is certified by the CGFNS, which is an organization in the US that looks at the ethical practices of these agencies, they are not allowed to charge you recruitment fees. So my advice to you, Tina, is run. We don't charge recruitment fees. You want to make sure that you are working with a company that is certified by CGFNS, because then you know that that company's practices has been reviewed and they are an ethically certified company. And you can check the CGFNS website for the list of those companies, of which AMN is one, with both our direct hire and our staffing arms. So hopefully that is helpful to you, Tina. So Anita, so Sehat is asking a question about travel bans. He says, are there any travel bans availed recently against any countries? So I think this is something we saw a few years ago. And I think some nurses may be feeling a bit anxious about the current presidency based on, past actions. Is this something that we're seeing or hearing anything about?
There has been warnings for travel restrictions from certain countries. So it would depend on the country that you're coming from. But for the majority of the countries, there hasn't been any travel restrictions once you receive an immigrant visa. I know that it is an area of concern given the current climate, but I have not come across any issues with the majority of my nurses with entering the United States once they've received their immigrant visa. It just depends on the certain, there's very few countries that have travel restrictions at this time. So if you're coming from Philippines, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, Kenya, I have not seen anything with those countries.
Okay, so it sounds like there is a very small group of countries that may be in this category, but for most people and most countries who are watching along, not something you need to worry about right now. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you, Anita. Okay, Chris, I see a question from Aaron. Aaron says, do you need to have a current priority date for the fee bill to be issued? Can you please clarify?
So you were supposed to, the rule that the Department of State is supposed to be following is if your priority date is current on that chart B that we talked about, they're supposed to issue a fee bill. Having said that, we almost are always seeing fee bills well before that. So the unfortunate reality is it seems to be a bit haphazard. I would probably talk to your employer and lawyer and see what the issue is. I would also tell you this, if your case was just approved in the last 60 days or something, I probably wouldn't be too concerned if the fee bill has not been issued.
Okay, there you go, Aaron. Okay, Anita, we have a question from Hector. Hector says, what are the repercussions or consequences of withdrawing a green card application? Is there anything to consider there?
Right. So if you withdraw a green card application, so if you're consular processing and you've already filed the I-140 and the I-140 is already approved, then the only repercussion is that you would have to find a new employer and give them that I-140 approval and begin the process from then. But if you're concerned about the government having on their file that you started a petition and then didn't move forward, there's not any consequences for that if you just changed your mind. If it was denied for reasons such as misrepresentation, then there would be consequences. But if you're simply withdrawing your application, you decided not to move forward, then there's not any repercussions. You won't have any negative consequences for any future applications as long as you didn't have misrepresentation or something like that. But if you do withdraw your application, then it just depends where you were with the process, where you will be able to pick up with your new employer. So if you have that I-140 approval, then you can retain your priority date and find a new employer. But if you never had the I-140 approval, then you will have to start the entire process over.
Okay, so some good considerations to think about there. Thank you, Anita. Okay, we're coming up on time. We're trying to get to as many questions as we can. So thank you guys for fast pacing this one with me. Okay, so Nicole has a question for you, Chris. This is an interesting one. I am curious. So she is asking for a relative. Can a former case 20 years ago recapture if they've become a nurse now? So the way that I'm understanding that is maybe there was a past priority date from 20 years ago. Can they recapture it now? Is there like any?
I mean, yeah, theoretically, the key thing is it's not enough to just say that you have a case from 20 years ago. Your lawyer is going to need to see the approval, or your friend's lawyer is going to need to see that approval notice from 20 years ago. So you will need to get that approval notice. Lawyer is going to have to investigate to make sure that that approval notice was, first of all, not used, number one. Number two, to make sure that it wasn't withdrawn. Maybe the old employer withdrew the I-140. Sometimes that can be problematic. So my answer is theoretically yes, but there's probably a lot more to it.
Interesting. Okay, so no limit on how far back you can go to recapture a priority date is what it's.
Yeah, I can tell you this, in our office, I wouldn't say regularly, but a couple of times a year, we will a work with, it's almost always an Indian nurse, because the Indian EB3 is just, it's like 12 or 13 years. It's terrible. And so we will every once in a while find there will be one of our clients will recruit an Indian nurse, and we'll work with that Indian nurse. And she might have a priority date from 2010 or something like that. And we recapture that date for her, and she actually gets her green card. It doesn't happen that often, but it will happen every so often.
Interesting. Very interesting. Okay. Thank you, Chris. So if you are watching along and you have heard all of these different terms that we've been talking about, H-1Bs, priority dates, recapturing priority dates, EB3s, fee bills, lots of different terms, I think your head can kind of almost spin a little bit. And you might be feeling at home a little bit lost. We want to let you know that we are here for you and we are here to help. So what we have done is we have taken all of the information about H-1Bs, EB3s, TNs, and we have put them into guidebooks for you. These are short pamphlets with information on what the process looks like, what you should be considering, and you can download these guidebooks for free. So we're going to drop the link in the chat where you can go to download these. Please take advantage of this opportunity. Go onto our website, download, read up. This is your life. You want to make sure that you are taking control of your life. We like to say control the things that you can control on this show. That is one of the things that you can control, your own knowledge about your process. So feel free to take advantage of those guidebooks. They're very helpful and hopefully can help you understand and answer a lot of questions. Okay, so we are almost at time. I think we're going to try and take a couple more questions, maybe one or two. We'll see how it goes. Anita, I am going to turn to you. So Olivia has a question. Olivia is asking, can a nurse apply for citizenship earlier if they marry a U.S. citizen after arriving? So sounds like Olivia is already here on her green card, which is great. And she would have to typically wait the 5 years, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
If she marries a U.S. citizen, can she apply earlier, or does she still need to wait the 5 years?
Yep, she can apply earlier. If she marries a U.S. citizen, then she can apply within 3 years.
Oh, okay. Interesting. That's great to know. All right.
Yeah,
so come here and find yourself an American partner.
There you go.
All right. Okay. So I think that is all that we have time for today. Thank you to Chris and Anita. We're going to end on that positive note. I appreciate you both taking all of the different questions we've had today. We've answered a lot of different questions. We've given our predictions for how we see the year progressing. I think we're all crossing our fingers for positive 2025. Hopefully this month is a sign of some positive things to come. But thank you both for being on and sharing your expertise and knowledge. Chris, as always, and Anita, as a newcomer, we really appreciate it.
I enjoyed being here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you, guys. All right. So if you are thinking, what other shows can I look forward to for the rest of this month? We have employer spotlights to close out May, Nurses Month. So I'm so excited. Next Friday, May 23rd, we are going to be showcasing Monument Health. And the following Friday, on May 30th, we are going to be showcasing Methodist Le Bonheur Healthcare. So these are two excellent employers, and we can't wait to share what they're looking for, where they're located, and what makes them special. So please feel free to tune in, come with questions ready. These are two employers that are going to be doing some big hiring events. So we are very excited to have them on. We also have our AMN Academy, which is every Monday at 6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time with our partners iPass and 9.09ers. These are free classes, everybody, so make sure to take advantage. Once again, I just want to wish everybody a happy International Nurses Month. The month of May is the month to celebrate you, to say thank you for your contributions, for all of the critical roles that you all play. So thank you for your love, your dedication. And we hope that you feel celebrated all month long. So thank you from AMN Healthcare International, and we hope to see you in America very soon. Onwards and upwards, everybody. Have a great one.